So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this fourth round of the Italian Youth Debate Championship in English. Today, we are here to witness a debate on the following motion. This House would require all foods already on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. There's also an Infoslide. Novel foods refers to food introduced in Europe from May 15, 1997, whose marketing is currently regulated by Regulation European 2015-2283. The proposition will be defended by the team Bright Sparks, is correct? Bright Sparks from Messina. And while the opposition will be defended by the team from Rome, named S-School, it's correct? S-School, okay. I would now like to ask the teams to introduce themselves, starting from the pro team. Please.
Good evening, I'm the first speaker of the proposition, Antonino Crisafulli.
Thank you.
My name is Arianna Accetta, and I'm the second speaker of the proposition.
Thank you.
My name is Anita Rufino, and I'm the third speaker of the proposition.
Thank you. And the reply speech will be...
I will be in charge of the reply speech.
Okay, thank you. Now, I will ask to the op team to introduce themselves.
Good evening. I am the first speaker of the opposition team, Domitilla Gonnelli.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Chiara Marinari, and I will be the second speaker of the opposition team.
Good evening. I'm Giordana D'Urso, and I will be the third speaker of the opposition team.
And the reply speech will be in charge of...
I will be doing the reply speech.
Okay, thank you. And let us introduce the panel of judges who will be adjudicating this debate. I'm Massimo Leone, and I will be the chair of this panel. Please, the other judges.
I'm Flora Benvenuti, and I'm one of the judges.
Hi, everybody. My name is Una Harnett. I'm one of the judges, too.
Okay, thank you. So, if everyone is ready, we can start. Okay? Judges are ready. Speakers are ready. Okay. 1 minute. I will take the official time. Okay? So if the first speaker of pro team is ready, can start.
I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone. I'm Antonino Crisafulli, and today I will be the first speaker of the proposition. I want to start my speech by adding to the definition given in the info slide that novel food legislation adopts a proactive approach in contrast to a traditional legislation, which is typically reactive. We support this motion because food safety shouldn't depend on luck. It should be guaranteed for everyone. Today, our food system is more complex than ever. We buy products made with new technologies, ingredients that didn't even exist a generation ago. With so much change, relying on tradition alone is no longer enough to keep people safe. Traditional foods are often safe just because they've been known for a long time. But that assumption can hide real risks like industrial farming, long supply chains, and hidden additives mean that contamination, allergens, and harmful substances can appear in any food, even the one we know best. We also know that food, especially ultra-processed food, play a major role in serious health problems like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and even mental health issues. So now our urgent aim is not just about avoiding risks of new exotic food. It's about protecting long-term health. Right now, only novel foods have to pass strict scientific checks. Experts look at nutrients, toxicology, and production methods, but traditional foods don't always go through the same process. And this creates loopholes. For an example, ingredients banned in the EU for safety reasons might be still allowed in other countries. And if those products are imported as traditional, they can enter the market without proper risk assessment, and this leaves consumers unprotected. There's also the issue of grieving water. When company pretend, yes,
POI.
Mr. POI. Yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry, but even if do you know that obviously when a food from another country enters the European market, it will be up to some assessments. That's normal. That always happens if something new from other countries, which is traditional in other countries, enters our market. So we have that. We do have it.
Yes, every food goes through assessments, but not every food goes through scientific assessments like novel foods. So we are not so protected, our safety is not protected like scientific assessments. So, and because right now only scientific checks, because our proposal is to apply the same scientific safety standard to all foods, not just new ones. And this means equal protection for everyone and more check in the food industry. Our team's line is that novel food law should be mandatory for all foods because they raise the level of safety, anticipate risk before they occur, and strengthen consumer trust in the food system. We have a model that it requires scientific checks on production processes, toxicology, nutritional profile, and ingredients. And the system can work by a digital dossier system by which companies upload data once, and EFSA can review efficiently any change in ingredients or I will start with our first argument. Novel food regulation require a pre-market authorization because companies must scientifically demonstrate that their product is safe before sold. And this is a fundamental improvement over the current system, which often reacts after the risks appear. The key difference is the approach. Novel food law requires a full scientific risk assessment before a product is allowed on the market. And this assessment check toxicology, nutritional impact, production methods. By contrast, current food laws, especially for imported foods, rely on conformity checks because inspectors verify whether a product meets fixed criteria such as hygiene rules or ingredient limits. But these criteria are narrow because they don't evaluate interaction between ingredients, long-term biological effects, new processing techniques, and cumulative exposure. So the current system checks whether the food fits the rules, not whether it's scientifically safe. For example, IGP foods, they are marketed as traditional, but they can legally use raw materials from other countries. They look local, but their supply chains are global, and yet only undergo narrow conformity checks, non-scientific assessments.
POI.
Our model, one standard, not scientific for all foods, actually protects consumers. With that established, current law failed to assess long-term risk, especially for ultra-processed food. Regulation, the PI ensures clean process, not term biological safety restriction typically appear where public health concerns emerge. With that established, let's move to the impact. With a stronger public, we can create stronger public and greater economic stability. Because mandatory novel food regulation before it occurs, reduce food scandals and public health crises, protects from economic damages caused by scandals, and leads to fewer food-related illnesses and healthier population with the improve of processing methods. When safety is guaranteed front, farmers, companies, and exporters avoid the massive loss caused by reactive regulation. For example, the EU novel food.
Si può interrompere il tempo? Perché temo che non si stia sentendo bene, arriva a spezzi la voce, non vorrei che si perdesse parte del discorso, non so, giudicate voi.
Sì, non so, gli altri giudici
Scusi.
avevano... Sì, prego.
Qualche ragazzo
No, anche noi non sentiamo bene.
Sì.
Anch'io faccio fatica a sentire perché a tratti proprio va via la voce. Non so se è un problema mio o per quello che ho scritto, cioè proprio sto facendo fatica.
Possiamo migliorare la connessione, magari ripartire dagli impatti, non so, dal punto in cui avete perso, perché
sì. No.
forse era abbastanza intenso, è un peccato perderlo.
Sì, scusami Giovanna, però ti prego di non interrompere più il dibattito. Questa è una cosa che decidiamo noi, ma non possiamo interrompere il dibattito autonomamente, assolutamente. No, era un giudice che aveva scritto.
Che non ha capito
infatti io stavo per...
no, l'ha scritto anche una ragazza, Domitilla.
E provare a, magari, lo so che non è proprio regolare, ma magari senza immagine sentiamo solo la voce, perché magari appesantisce meno la connessione e forse sentiamo meglio.
Facciamo così, riproviamo se l'altra squadra è d'accordo e i giudici sono d'accordo, riproviamo a sentire questo speech in modo tale che anche l'altra squadra può interagire più correttamente. Non so, Antonino, ti chiedo, c'è un modo con il quale puoi migliorare la tua connessione?
Posso provare a cambiarla. Ora provo, forse collego i dati mobili. Ho provato a collegare i dati mobili, non so se si sente meglio.
No, al momento no.
Forse senza il video e soltanto con la voce appesantiamo meno la
fai una cosa, spegni il video, vediamo come va la voce senza il video. Vai, prova a parlare.
Va bene, così non so se si sente meglio.
Direi meglio, sì. Che dici? Gli altri giudici che dicono? Meglio. Allora, facciamo così, proviamo a risentire questo discorso, ripartiamo da zero e ripartiamo questo discorso con, diciamo, a webcam spenta, eccezionalmente, poi dopo invece durante il dibattito la dovrai tenere accesa. E quindi ripartiamo, ok?
Certo.
Va bene, allora ti do io il via.
Certo.
Appena sei pronto, vai, prego.
Va bene, 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone. I'm Antonino Crisafulli, and today I will be the first speaker of the proposition. I want to start by adding to the definition given in the info slide that novel food legislation adopts a proactive approach in contrast to traditional legislation, which is typically reactive. We support this motion because food safety shouldn't depend on luck. It should be guaranteed for everyone. Today, our food system is more complex than ever. We buy products made with new technologies and ingredients that didn't even exist a generation ago. With so much change, relying on tradition alone is no longer enough to keep people safe. Traditional foods are often assumed to be safe just because they've been known for a long time. But that assumption can hide real risks, like industry farming, long supply chains, and hidden additives, mean that contamination, allergens, and harmful substances can appear in any food, even the ones we think we know best. We also know that food, especially ultra-processed food, play a major role in serious health problems like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and even mental health issues. So now our urgent aim is not just about avoiding risks of new exotic food. It's about protecting long-term health. Right now, only novel foods have to pass strict scientific checks. Experts look at nutrients, toxicology, and production methods, but traditional foods don't always go through the same process, and this creates loopholes. For example, ingredients banned in the EU for safety reasons might still be allowed in other countries. If those products are imported as traditional, they can enter the market without proper risk assessment, and that leaves consumers unprotected. There's also the issue of greenwashing. When companies pretend that their products are more natural or eco-friendly than they really are, without proper checks, these claims can pass and easily mislead people. So our proposal is simple. Apply the same scientific standards to all foods, not just ones. This means equal protection for everyone and more checks in food industry. Our team's line is that novel food law should be mandatory for all foods because they a level of safety, anticipate risks before they occur, and strengthen consumer trust in the food system. We have a model that we require that scientific checks on production process, toxicology, nutritional profile, and ingredients. And this system can work by a digital dossier system by which companies upload the data once and EFSA can review it efficiently. Novel food regulation requires pre-market authorization because companies must scientifically demonstrate that their product is safe before it's sold. This is a fundamental improvement over the current system, which often reacts after the risks appear. And this is a first argument. Novel food law achieves a stronger level of safety. The key difference is the approach. Novel food law requires a full scientific risk assessment before a product is allowed on the market. Novel food assessment check toxicology, nutritional impact, production methods. And by contrast, for current food laws, especially for imported foods, rely on conformity checks. Inspectors verify whether a product meets fixed criteria such as hygiene rules, ingredient limits, or labeling standards. But these criteria are narrow because they don't evaluate interactions between ingredients, long-term biological effects, new processing techniques, and cumulative exposure. So the current system checks whether the food fits the rules, not whether it is scientifically safe. For an example, IGP foods, they can legally use raw material from other countries. They look local, yet they only undergo narrow conformity checks, not scientific assessments. And this proves our point. The current system regulates labels, not risks. And only our model, one scientific standard for all foods, actually protects consumers. Current laws fail to assess long-term health risks, especially from ultra-processed foods. Existing regulation like HACCP ensures clean processes, not long-term biological safety. Restrictions typically appear after public health concern, after that illnesses or health problems like diabetes, obesity, disease, cancer, and mental issue start to be a big problem. By applying novel food regulation to all foods, we finally evaluate these elements before they reach consumers, and we gain a scientific advantage. Every additive, process, and formulation undergoes nutritional and toxicological assessment. With that established, let's move to the impact, because mandatory novel food regulation prevents harm before it occurs, reduces food scandals and public health crises, and protects industries from economic damages caused by scandals, like E. coli in spinach and the horse meat scandal.
Right.
Yes. Please.
But you know that there are many non-novel foods, so let's say legacy foods, which were a health risk and were analyzed, like off the top of my head, Red 40 or additives or things like that, have been classified as dangerous. So it's not that all legacy foods or not novel foods are in market freely without any restrictions.
No, but there are a lot of foods that are in the market that are considered traditional, but are also dangerous because they haven't been checked. Our model is to check every food and to be sure that every food is safe. When safety is guaranteed upfront, farmers, companies, and exporters avoid the massive losses caused by reactive regulation. For example, the EU Novel Food Regulation requires EFSA safety assessments before approval. Traditional foods, by contrast, are only restricted once risks emerge, as seen with trans fats, which were limited only after clear and health concerns. This is why making a novel food law mandatory for all foods raises safety across the entire market. We are not dismissing existing protections. We are arguing that they rely on narrow conformity checks that cannot capture modern risks. Novel food law provides a full scientific assessment, the higher standard consumers deserve in a complex food system. Mandatory novel food regulations ensure that every food, not just new ones, meets that standard. With this, I end my speech.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Antonino. Your speech was 7 minutes and 53 seconds. Okay. The other judges are ready. Okay, and then we'll give the floor to the first speaker of the op team. Please.
Thank you. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, judges and fellow debaters. I am Domitilla Gonnelli, and I'm the first speaker of the opposition team. And the first thing I would like to start is to answer to my fellow debater from the proposition team. First of all, you said in your speech that all foods will require the same assessment that novel foods go through, such as traditional foods that can be very dangerous for us now because they aren't checked as novel foods are. But we think, as the opposition team, that if all of traditional foods didn't go through, all the oppositional food that still go through assessments now, we would have a health crisis. A health crisis would be here if all the traditional foods would actually be dangerous for us if they weren't checked in any way. And by this point, I get to my other confutation that I would like to do. So that you said that none of the traditional foods are actually checked in any way and they're free on the market, but that is not true because there are standards of microbiologies and chemical standards which are requirements to do on traditional foods, which means that they are classified as safe in the market, even if they don't go through the same assessment that novel foods go through. Now, I would like to state our 3 points as our 3 theses as the opposition team. So first of all, we have the practical and economic feasibility, which is the point that I will go through, the scientific and more feasible alternatives, and the weak legal foundations. So the practical and the economical unfeasibility, Excuse me. So the practical and the economical on feasibility thesis, we started by what we stated as the opposition team is that the current data demonstrates the practical impossibility of this proposal. Because, first of all, the data that we found says that Europe has, first of all, thousands of food products on the market. And the estimates range from 50,000 to 10,000 foods in the market. And for now, EFSA, which is the I'll give you a definition, which is the European Food Safety Authority. So it's basically the European authority that evaluates food-related risk to protect consumer health, providing scientific advice for UI decision makers. And the EFSA has basically reached its capacity. So the EFSA processed in all its time, so since 1997, when novel foods were stated and when the law was made, processed 992 novel food applications between 2018 and 2024, so roughly 40 per year, which would make, at this rate, reassessing every food on the market impossible, and it would require at least 1,000 years, even without receiving new application, to assess all of the traditional foods that we have right now on the market. So it is scientifically impossible to implement even all the foods that we have on the market. Then I would like to talk about the costs of what it would take to reassess every food which we have in the market now. Yes, I accept.
So if a previously safe food is later found to contain allergens or contaminants, do you think that the reactive measures that you use are sufficient, or would a proactive assessment be better?
No, I think that now in the market, assessments are being made, and that it's impossible and unnecessary, even with the cost and even with the realistic of it all, that it's impossible to have the same assessment of novel foods, but assessments are made. Food is not sent on the market without any type of assessment. So as I was saying, now we also have to take in the astronomical economic costs that the assessment of all novel foods would bring. So first of all, each full EFCA dossier costs to $1,000 to $500, and this would require complex toxicological studies. Reassessing thousands of ingredients would cost billions of euros, inevitably passed to consumers, because what would this bring? It would bring that some of the foods, while being reassessed, would be taken off the market, and this would also be have a cost for the consumer, so us. So it would take for us to not have foods in the supermarket, and we would find ourselves with half of the food that we have now. This would also take a big consequence on Europe as a whole, because it would make us, it would take a period of pending evaluation. So a lot of products would require withdrawal from the market, and so we would remain without food, or with a big part of the traditional foods that we make use of every day. The fact that this also comes with the competitivity that we have in Europe. So taking foods off the market and making them actually in pending evaluation, so doing the same assessment that we do for novel foods, would take them off the market, and it would make Europe more vulnerable to other rivals, even the United States or other continents, which are still producing foods and are still making money from it. This would cause Europe a great deal of negative economic state. And also, if we talk about just this, we can see that it would be a market paralysis. So basically, if existing foods were deemed unauthorized and still until reassessed, even all supply chains could be interrupted and prices would rise due to compliance's cost. And this would also be some kind of disruptiveness to small and medium-sized food producers, because while maybe big producers and maybe would have a lot of money in their already stated company, so they would have money to sustain themselves, maybe small and medium-sized producers would not, and so they would die, and all the small and medium-sized industry would have the risk of collapsing, and so causing a crisis in the commercial sector. Even undermining this. Okay, So this would bring us to the fact that we would have a crisis in the market because we would not have foods for ourselves because they're under evaluation from being under the same evaluation novel foods are in. Second of all, it would risk the fact that we as consumers would not have food on our shelves in the supermarkets or even where you can buy foods in general. Third of all, it would basically cause probably the collapses of the low and the medium producers, which don't have companies and can't sustain having the same pending evaluation as a big company can sustain because they have money and they can sustain themselves without actually selling foods. And third of all, it is scientifically impossible to do it. It would take 1,000 years. We do not have the money and we do not have the time to evaluate all of the novel foods that, like all of the traditional foods that are now on the market. And the thing is that they already go through some assessments. Foods are not sent into the market without having assessment, and they are scientifically assessed. And it is not a routine, as you said. It is assessed, and they have microbiologies and chemical standards that they are assessed. So, of course, there are big companies, and some foods are processed differently than others, and they're not processed all in the same way. But if they're not processed, then there's a legal cause. So that's the end of my speech. Thank you.
Thank you. 7 minutes and 59 seconds. Okay, so we will give the floor to the second speaker of the Pro team, please.
Yes, if you can all hear me well, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, honorable judges and members of the House. As the second speaker of the proposition, I will address the weaknesses in the opposition's argument and deepen our case with further points. So the main point is that we are talking about processing food. That isn't checked in the status quo. Current laws check some aspects, but risks come from processing. Our model is digital, it is practical and possible. So we suggest that we check categories of foods, and we do this periodically and automatically. Economically, there isn't this scenario described by the opposition. The impact is safer. So food standards are considered, and food scandals damage companies and they cause crisis. Also, the opposition main concern is cost, speed, and burden on industry. Our impact instead is on human health and preventing foodborne illnesses and chronic illnesses. Public health must come first, and even a small reduction in disease, contamination, or long-term toxicity outweighs administrative efficiency. Also, there is a law from 2018 that has made the process quicker, and this can be done in a few months. So our first speaker has explained how novel foods law create a stronger framework of society. I will take this further in our second argument by demonstrating that traditional foods are no longer inherently safe, and that novel food regulation is the only framework capable of managing innovation, emerging risks in today's food system. So our second argument is traditional foods are not always safe, and novel food law addresses innovation and its emerging risks. So food technology evolves rapidly. An evidence is lab-grown meat and ultra-processed foods. Many foods hide risks that are not evident when relying on the traditional classifications. Even foods with familiar ingredients can be reformulated, ultra-processed, and produced using new technologies, altering their chemical composition. No, thank you. So the novel classification system helps identify these changes by categorizing foods based on their extent and purpose of processing. So ultra-processed foods are creating using industrial processes such as extrusion, hydrogenation, chemical flavorings, colorants, and emulsifiers. Examples are soft drinks, packaged snacks, reconstituted meat, and also breakfast cereals. So research has shown that high ultra-processed foods consumption is linked to obesity, heart disease, and digestive problems, especially on young people that are attracted to ultra-processed foods because of their hyper-palatability and their marketing pressure. So they should, in principle, be treated as novel foods, yet under the current EU rules, they are still treated as conventional because the responsibility to request this safety assessment often falls on the industry itself, allowing them to reach the consumers without independent science-based review. So mandatory food law would close this regulatory gap by requiring a rigorous evidence-based evaluation of both the ingredients and the production process, ensuring that all foods are assessed for hidden and long-term health risks. So current law fails to control ultra-processed foods because most regulatory frameworks were developed before the UPFs became dominant. So with yes.
I'm sorry, but are you aware that the European Union actually has laws that prevent the use of unauthorized additives and food, especially in processed foods? There's a regulation in particular that represents this.
Yes, but many foods escape the controls since, as we said, without the novel food laws, it is not a burden of the industries to apply to these controls. As I said, the current law fails to control them because it doesn't evaluate the level, the purpose, and the health impact of the industrial processing itself. So this regulatory gap shifts responsibility onto consumers, assuming that they can make better choices while ignoring that the reality of ultra-processed foods, they dominate the market because they are cheaper, they are everywhere and designed to be irresistible. So individual choice is not a sufficient safeguard, and the law fails to control the real source of the risk. Fresh foods require time, skills, and equipment. So the issue is not willpower, it's the environment and the laws. No, thank you. A growing body of evidence, including reviews and series in The Lancet, shows that ultra-processed foods are a significant global health threat. For example, traditional milk is safe, but when it's processed into concentrated protein powders, new risks emerge. So novel food regulation would require safety checks before these products enter the market. And mandatory novel food law would require safety assessments before the widespread use. So to link it all back, our novel food law would future-proof the food system and ensure safety standards to adapt to innovation. Moving to our third argument, which is consumer trust and transparency, at the heart of food safety is one simple principle, which is public trust. And trust is built not on assumptions, but on evidence and transparency. Applying novel food standards to all food strengthens both. So the scientific benefits are substantial since mandatory novel food assessments required detailed dossiers, toxicological studies, and nutritional evaluations, and an objective layer of scrutiny that cannot rely on the actual regulations. This is not just about bureaucracy, it's about preventive science. Transparency is equally crucial. So the EFSA publishes its safety assessments openly, allowing scientists, policymakers, and citizens to see why a food is considered safe. By contrast, many risks under traditional food law are managed behind the scenes, invisible to the public. Transparency transforms regulations from a black box to a source of legitimacy. So in a time when distrust of processed and industrial food is growing, applying novel food standards universally sends a powerful reassurance because consumers' safety comes first. So administrative costs can be reversed, regulatory delays can be fixed, and bureaucratic inefficiency can be streamlined. But the health consequences of unsafe food can be undone. So that is why prevention must outweigh reaction and science must outweigh assumption. And the opposition asks us to accept the preventable risks in exchange for temporary administrative convenience, and we reject that trade-off. Since the choice is clear and under the status quo, harms happens after a mass exposure when it's too late to undo. And with that, I end my speech. Thank you.
Okay. Your speech lasted 8 minutes. Okay. So everybody is ready. We can go to the. We can go on. Judges are ready. Okay. So the floor is of the second speaker of the team, please.
Hello, I'm Chiara Marinari. I will be the second speaker of the opposition team, and I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first of all, I would like to comment your opinion on our proposition team's speech. So first of all, I have a bit of a doubt that I would like to give word to. So you said that you have a new technological way of testing, which would reduce the time that it takes to test each food. You didn't specify which is this new way of testing, because it could be really interesting also to reduce costs and reduce the time and the effort new little industries have to make to enter the market. So we didn't really catch that. And I also would like to say that traditional foods are not only processed foods. So your speech was mainly based on processed foods. And yes, we all know that some processed foods can be dangerous. But these foods are usually known as having some problems. We just had the example of prosciutto, which has been classified as a #1 cancerogen. This is a legacy food. It is a traditional food, but we can see how they have had tests and they have signaled it in the dangerous food list. So the last point I would like to explain about your speech was that, yes, every industry can bypass these regulations. Traditional industries, novel industries, we will always have someone who will want to spend less, take less time, be advantaged, but that is a completely different conversation, and we cannot base our whole laws on this. So I will start with our second pieces. So scientific evidence and less disruptive alternatives. So first of all, if all foods were high risk, so high risk meaning dangerous to our population, or at least needing tests and major security, we would have a national crisis. So traditional foods, problems in traditional foods can maybe be intoxications due to certain bacteria in fish. We all know this. this is something that the public is aware of. It's as technology goes forward, new specific ingredients are tested, and if ingredients are contained in a product, we will be notified, and in some cases, it will be taken off market. Obviously, new regulations will always be really, really safe. So in the United States, maybe they will have anything in their products. They don't really care about what consumers eat. But in the accept.
So, doesn't treating new and old foods differently create a double standard that could confuse consumers or undermine their trust in food regulations?
The thing is, as I just said, if a traditional product has dangerous ingredients, we will know. This will not be occulted because the EFSA has a responsibility in checking what the new technological evolutions tell us. So you were talking about sicknesses. So let's say obesity or elevated heart rate. I would like to take the example of palm oil. Palm oil is a problem. I didn't decline. Is a problem in today's market, but that doesn't mean that we have to completely exclude it from our diet. We just have to have the right information, because obviously if a kid eats processed food every day, lunch and dinner, he will have health problems. That isn't on food safety regulation. That is on health information. I accept.
Thank you. Are you aware that in the status quo, only if industries apply for a check, the check happens? So we might not know all of you're claiming that we know everything about.
No, I'm claiming that legally. So under the European law, every novel food, that's what the regulation says. Every novel food put on the market after 1997 will be subject to the same regulation. Our motion says that even legacy foods, so foods on the market before 1997, should be subject to the same regulations. I'm not saying everyone is honest. We all know that everyone is not honest. But this, as I just said, is a different conversation. We should, if you want to discuss this, we would be talking about how laws are imposed on industries and big monopolies. It's different. We're talking about simply changing the status quo. So we have other alternatives. We can better research, study different ingredients inside products. We cannot take every food that is on the market and analyze it one by one. We have to create high-risk foods and low-risk foods, foods that we know are safe for consumption. And then I would like to talk about our legal argument. So how would we go on with this change in the status quo? So the thing is, once something has become law, it's really difficult to change what has already been implemented if we don't have really, really valid reasons. The thing is, no one has, or if they have died or had a serious health risk due to one specific food, that food has been taken off the market. We know of examples of industries which produced contaminated foods or foods with all allergens that weren't declared on the ingredient risk, but that's a legal problem. That means that industry will close, that company will close, that company will have some repercussions, but we cannot do the same process for novel foods, so foods which have production processes that we don't really know, and compare them to things like milk. We know that pasteurized milk is really dangerous for us. It is not in commerce. Even if it was something considered a traditional food. You just said about protein powders derived from milk. Yes, but these are novel foods. These pass the test. So we have a sort of security, we have safety assessments, we have the certainty that if something is dangerous, really dangerous for our health, and it has to be removed from the market, that's what will happen. Because the EU has an interest in their population, in their consumers. So we cannot say that our lives are at risk because not all foods are checked in the same way. So this is the end of my speech, and thank you.
Okay, your speech lasted 8 minutes and 26 seconds. Okay. Judges are ready. So we give the floor to the first speaker of the proposition team, please.
Thank you. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anita Rufino, and I'm proudly standing as the third speaker of the proposition team in today's motion. Throughout my speech, I will first crystallize this whole debate. I will give a rebuttal of everything that the other team has said so far, and I will strengthen my team's case. So first, I would like to address some claims that the second speaker of the opposition has previously made in this debate. They started their speech saying they have a doubt, so I will gladly clear it for them. We never claimed there's a new technology of testing. It's actually a reform. It's a law that makes everything easier, transparent, and faster. It's a reform. It's a reform that was installed in 2018, and it installs deadlines. It makes the whole process faster, and it is true. It does take time for this system to work, but it does work, and we need it for valid reasons. The second speaker claimed there are no valid reasons, and it's okay.
Why?
Sorry, later. There are no valid reasons because when foods are found dangerous, they get removed of the market. For example, if someone dies because of food, it gets removed from the market. We can't bring people back. Isn't it better to prevent instead of working to make things better after the harm has occurred? It's better to assure that all foods on the market are actually safe and won't cause health problems like they are. The point, please.
Hi, I wanted to ask you how the law that you previously stated would work. How would it make the process easier and clearer?
It's a law that makes things clearer. I already said it installs deadlines, for example, so it makes the whole application and confirmation process faster. It putting pressures on companies because often it's not really the fault of the system, but companies that give applications that are quite incomplete or inaccurate. So the system has already been renewed to solve these problems. So this is how it would work. Also, the other team has claimed that we know when foods, like what foods, whether foods are safe or not. But actually, the way that the system works is that industry have to ask for these foods to be scientifically tested. And so if the industry doesn't ask, the food gets treated as traditional, even though it might be not. So as our not now. As our previous speakers have already explained, we have ultra-processed foods which are treated as traditional foods, but they're not, because they have new techniques of processing, etc. So their main concern also is cost and time, but I will gladly refute both of these points. So the thing is that the opposition tried to say that our model is too expensive, but actually what we care about is prevention. Food scandals actually end up costing more than the system that we want to implement. And if it was implemented, it would reduce food scandals, because food scandals are caused by the general unsafety of some foods that are treated as traditional. And also we have long-term economic benefits because avoiding disasters saves money. And so why would consumers bear the risk so companies can save money? Shifting the cost to public health systems is more expensive overall. Also, the other team has made a case about time and practicality, but as our team has already proved, there has been a reform that makes everything smoother. There are clearer criteria. It's been digitalized, faster and standardized evaluations. So it's proven to go smoothly, and if it takes time, it's worth it. Because the problems that we have in the status quo is that action only comes after harm. So we have recalls, emergency bans, scandals. This is actually more. This actually wastes more time, resources, and it puts society to be unhealthier. And we stand for the health of society, and so we need to make a compromise. As my team has already said, the traditional foods do not equal safe foods. Long use does not magically erase harmful effects. And so we need scientific tests for all foods. We need the laws to be mandatory. Novel food rules require toxicological checks, nutritional evaluation, and a full analysis of production methods. I would like to give further examples of traditional foods that have changed because of processing, because of new techniques. For example, wheat flour is traditional, but chemically modified starches are widely used in UPFs. These may affect metabolism, and they behave differently than natural wheat. Mandatory novel food law would ensure testing before approval. Another example, apples are traditional, but new nano coatings to extend shelf life introduce unknown long-term effects. The second speaker previously said that we are aware of whether foods are dangerous or not, but I don't think that when you go to the store to buy an apple, you are aware that there are nano coatings. Sugar is traditional, but reformulated blends are effectively new foods. So we have traditional food, but it becomes unsafe food through processing, and it's not regulated by laws that can help make these foods healthier and safer. Also, we have also mentioned previously the ingredient inconsistency across borders. Some substances banned in the EU for safety reasons are still allowed elsewhere. So they can, when these foods get imported under the label of traditional, they can bypass the strict checks required. For example, in Canada, farmers often spray glyphosate as a technique to farm lentils, chickpeas, and it's a practice banned in Italy. And when you go to the supermarket to buy them, you can read the label. It doesn't mention the glyphosate because it's not an ingredient but a processing. And by traditional laws, they only check ingredients but not processing techniques. There is a regulation that the EU has put, so they ensure that these foods meet EU residue limits, but these checks are not always perfect or complete. European limits might not fully take into account the heavy use of glyphosate in Canada, and that other pesticides banned in Italy might still be used abroad. Since labels don't have to say whether glyphosate was used, shoppers cannot know this information just by reading the package, and this harms the consumer trust. Without scientific scrutiny, labeling becomes unreliable, risks go undetected, and consumers are left vulnerable. So, again, the opposition defends the status quo.
Anita, your time is over.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear anything. That's okay. With this, I conclude my speech. Thank you for listening. Oh,
9 minutes and 50 seconds. Okay. It's the time of the third speaker of Op Team, please.
Honorable judges, I'm Giordana D'Urso, and I will be saying the third speech for the opposition team. I would like to start by stating the fact that novel foods are foods that are not known. Novel foods are new. They need new regulations, and traditional foods have already been controlled with several regulations by the EU. I would also remind that there's no doubt that we obviously live in a truly difficult time regarding foods. But as previously stated from the first team, there is a problem of new foods, new things that determine a change and are not safe because they are not known. They also stated the fact that that processed food is an even bigger risk, but processed food is not determined as a novel food. In addition to that, there are already regulations for processed foods and for traditional foods that are microbiological standards and chemical standards that are provided by the EU for every single food. I would also like to state that traditional foods have already well-known risks, so it is not worth spending the money that we need to use for different resources as we live in a truly difficult time, as stated before, and also that removing traditional foods in order to add regulations would remove them from the market, therefore not helping small businesses and reducing economical and productive work, therefore creating an economical collapse. There is an example of, especially regarding the second point stated by the opposite team regarding processed foods. You stated that processed foods are a bigger risk. Well, there is an example that goes against that. For example, you stated that processed foods include preservatives or food coloring, and for the food coloring Red 40, there was a big scandal and therefore even more regulations to determine the health risks of such product. In order, food scandals will not be a problem if traditional foods are removed from the market, as there won't be any food.
There's also a regulation stated by the EU number 1333 of 2008 that has specific regulations for food additives. Therefore, we already have such regulations to determine whether a product is safe or not. For example, there's also the regulation 1151 of 2012, which protects the designation of origin, which was a problem stated by the third speaker. There is no such problem. There's no problem of border control, since in the European Union we already have regulations that determine and regulate exactly such problem. This has been. I refuse. This has happened for Parmigiano, or for ham and salami, or mozzarella. You also stated the law that I already asked the POI regarding the law that was explained by the first, second, and third speaker, but I still haven't had the answer that I wanted, because you stated that foods should be removed before creating such problem, especially death or even health problems, health risks, obesity, or a salmonella, or various cases. But as I stated before, there are several regulations and laws that must be followed according to the European Union that had already solved such problem and are focused on preventing more and more critical problems. Regarding our topics of cost and time, we must remember that we have a limited budget to spend. And it would not be useful for our future as the human race and as Europeans to spend every single penny on this problem, especially because of problems like the environment. So we must divide such funds between different issues, of different nature. And also, I accept.
So are you accepting the possibility that consumers could be exposed to unknown risks, since there are some foods introduced decades ago that have never been tested under the modern safety standards?
Well, we want to start by saying that some risks exist. We're not saying that there is no risk, but we're saying that prevention is an important point of the regulations of the European Union, and especially for novel foods, which have it's because of the law, they need to have such regulations and have to respect some health standards that are decided by the European Union. So we are not talking about unknown risks, since these unknown risks are going to be prevented by what was stated in the European Union. He also talked about the fact that we believe time is an issue and you do not. So first of all, you talked about a reform that makes it smooth, but we do not understand which reform you're also talking about, especially because it was stated that it takes at least 1,000 years to control every single novel food. And even though you say it would take less, novel foods are continuously being developed. For example, in 50 years, we may have reduced the number of novel foods that haven't been, or traditional foods that have been not controlled, but we will have new foods to control. Especially, there's the example of fruit. A lot of farmers recently mix different foods. For example, there's the strawberry apple, which is a mix between strawberries and apples. And this creates a new type of food that must have new regulations and must have new supervision. There is prevention, and especially history does give us proof that traditional foods are not an issue anymore. Every issue that we might have with traditional foods has already been known and has already been solved. Therefore, we can regulate it, and we know that this problem exists, and we know how to resolve such problem. There are already laws that for traditional foods that include not only the food, but also the ingredients and the preservatives. Therefore, I would like to conclude by saying that the problem is already attacked by the root. So we already have prevention. We already have resolved the main issues. And there is no need to spend more money and more time on things that are not a fundamental risk. Because the main risks, the main importance are novel foods, not traditional foods that had already been regulated and have already been determined not a risk. Thank you. I will conclude my speech.
Okay, thank you. Your speech lasted 7 minutes and 39 seconds. So the first part of this debate is concluded, and we now can go on for the reply speech, starting from the reply speech of opposition team, please.
Okay, so I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So now I will try to summarize both the theses of my team, so the opposition team and the proposition team. So I'd like to start by stating our theses as the opposition team. So in our 3 speeches, we stated 3 main theses. So the practical and economic unfeasibility, the scientific and more feasible alternatives, and the weak legal foundations that the motion could bring, if applied, of course, in real life. So the first thesis stated that if this motion was actually applied in real time, we would have problems both in time and in costs. So we would have problems in time because, as my fellow speakers said, it would actually take 1,000 years to actually assess all the traditional foods that still haven't been assessed under the same regulations as novel foods. This would actually bring that even if we process all of the traditional foods, there would not even be the time to process the novel foods that are still coming up and are still existing, as the third speaker said. And there were not actually, maybe some already traditional foods that are not processed still would cause some problems to maybe for obesity or others symptoms that they could cause if they're not assessed. But they would still be in the market because we would not actually have the realistic time to assess them. So this is still a very present problem. Second of all, we would have the problem of the economical costs. So the fact that this cost way too much for the industry, and it would cost way too much for the companies, the big companies, the little companies, and even for us, the consumers. Then we talked about the legal foundations. So the fact that regulatory norms should not apply retroactively to situations that already are legally concluded, and it would actually be a big problem for the EU. And even it would cause risks for the rivalry between our continent, so the European Union, and other states such as the United States or even China. Then we talked about the reassuring scientific evidence. So the fact that there would actually be the EU actually recognized the need for global economic competitiveness, and this would actually create problems for the EU as such. Now I am going to talk about the other 3 points that were stated by the proposition team. So that novel foods raise the level of safety, raise the level of safety, that traditional foods may not always be safe, and that transparency for the public could be crucial. But so they said that novel foods raise the level of safety. So they would be more safe because they are technically proven scientifically. But we actually said that it's true that novel foods and traditional foods would be actually scientifically proven, so they would have been tested. But we also said that now traditional foods are still tested, even if they're not tested all in the same manner as novel foods are. So traditional foods, they said also that traditional foods are not always safe, but we know that on the market, the foods are on the market for a reason, and it's true there are different companies that do different things, but usually it's the law. So if the companies don't respect it, they probably have consequences that they need to come across. And then that transparency is crucial, that it's true that it's true that they said that public trust is important at the time, but it's also said that we know that traditional foods are actually tested, and we do not actually know what happens in different companies. So even in novel foods, or if it's on novel foods or traditional foods, we do not know as the public what happens in the companies. Thank you.
Thank you. 4 minutes and 7 seconds. And so we can conclude our debate with the reply speech of proposition team. Please.
Okay, so my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. So this debate comes down to one key question: who actually ensures safety, fairness, and protection of human health in the best way possible? So this debate has been about which system better protects the consumers in a modern, globalized, technologically evolving food market. And our side has shown that only a unified, science-based approval system can guarantee equal safety and future-proof the food system. So the opposition defends the status quo, but the status quo relies on a narrow conformity checks. So we showed that novel food law provides a pre-market scientific assessment, including toxicology, nutritional impact, production methods, and this is something that traditional law does not require. Current systems act after harm appears, and novel food law prevent harm before it reaches consumers. So the proposition never explained why some foods deserve this scientific testing while others do not, and they didn't offer a mechanism to improve the transparency, and saying that the system works does not make these loopholes disappear. So they framed cost as a barrier, but they never showed that the foods on the shelves today are not the one of the past. We have showed that only with scientific evaluation we can capture long-term and cumulative effects, and that's why our model is proactive and their model is reactive. And with a proactive model, we showed that we want to guarantee ingredient inconsistency safety across borders, and we want to ban substances that are entering through imports, and we are addressing the gaps, and our impacts are preventing illnesses, and we are doing it in a time that is manageable, since with the reform, with the renovated procedure, there are digital submissions, there are simplified, centralized, and the authorization procedure are done online. So our impacts are long-term and high magnitude, since we want to prevent foodborne illnesses and chronic disease, and we want to future-proof this regulation in a rapidly evolving food system. Our side showed that current law cannot anticipate innovation, and that consumers can't rely on assumptions, because a universal science-based approval system is the only model that protects everyone equally. At the end of the day, the question is simple. Do you want a food system based on checklists or a food system based on science? Our side delivers the only model that protects public health, restores trust, and matches the complexity of modern food production. Once a person develops a chronic disease linked to long-term exposure, there is no regulatory recall that can give them their health back. So cancer does not get unapproved, and organ damage is not reversible by better labeling. So for safety, fairness, and the future of our food system, the proposition defends values that are linked to protecting human health. And with that, I end my speech.
Thank you. 4 minutes. So thank you for this debate. We can clap to everybody, and now we are going to analyze this debate, and we will return in a reasonable time. Okay.